espouse their advocacy for a party left. They are supporting, or they are really parang legal fronts ng Communist Party of the Philippines.
Malacanang believes that President Duterte's recent allegations against the Makabayan Bloc have basis.
Naniniwala kaming may basihan po ang mga ito at itong sinabi ng ating Pangulo, ito'y dahil nais niyang maprotektahan ang mga mag-aaral na nasa kolehiyo na hinihikayat na sumali sa kanilang grupo.
Bayan Muna calls the move a political squid tactic meant to undermine opposition groups.
Bayan Muna is a legitimate party. It's registered with the COMELEC.
On my last day, I would continue to criticize and say something about itong mga party list. At hindi lang ang left. Ito ay ginagamit ng mga mayaman, lahat ng mga may negosyante.
This is designed as a political squid tactic against the Makabayan Bloc as well as the political opposition. Kami ay mga unarmed activists, no? Hindi kami mga rebelde.
Members of the opposition are protesting the president's call for people not to vote for candidates identified with leftist groups. How will red tagging as a campaign strategy discredit political rivals, affect voters' decisions in the coming elections? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. We will be joined by our guests and the other chiefs when we return. Welcome to the Chiefs. I'm Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin online Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star at maya-maya po sasamahan tayo ni Ed Lingao of One News. Ami, tayong dalawa muna. Good evening.
Oo nga. Good evening.
Umpisahan natin sa balitang politika. Kanina, binalita namin sa big story si Congressman Lito Atienza. Parang nagpaparinig na kay Manny Pacquiao na kalimutan mo na lang ako. Parang ayaw nang tumakbo.
Kaya na-offend nga si Senator Ping Lacson. Sabi niya, bumalik daw si Atienza sa school, mag-aral daw ng good manners and right conduct.
Pero nagulat din ako sa dalawang yung quote, di ba? Una, si Ping Lacson, tinanong. Kasi para buuin lang natin yung storya, not only did Lito Atienza say na his health is preventing him from campaigning, parang may knee surgery yata siya. So people don't need to panic. Pero may knee surgery si Lito Atienza. He's saying, sige na, Senator Pacquiao, tumakbo ka na. And then he said, kung hindi ako tatakbo, gusto ko si Tito Soto na lang ang katandem mo.
Kaya nag-react ng gano'n si Senator Ping. At saka, merong implication nga na mag-withdraw na nga si Senator Lacson.
At sinabi rin yun naman ni Pacquiao, i-consider ko lang naman niya kung mag-withdraw si Senator Lacson. Pero alam mo, nakaka-intriga, and I don't know if you have more context on this, pero yung quote lang na finlash naman kay Tito Soto is he said, I am humbled by that, and of course, I will welcome such a development. Parang hindi ko alam kung may iba kang konteksto doon, because if you look at it, parang walang Viber group si Senator Lacson tsaka si Tito Soto.
Siyempre naman, sasabihin, siyempre gusto niya na merong sumusuporta sa kanya.
Oh, pero nasaktan muna yung kasama niya eh.
Pero hindi, sinabi rin naman niya na solid pa rin yung team nila ni Ping.
Ayun, okay. Kaya kinukuha ko po sa Philippine Star para buo yung konteksto. No? Sige. Anyway, basahin niyo po bukas sa Philippine Star. Nandiyan po ang buong storya, marami pang storya. But we'll go to another part of our politics today. Now, joining us, bayan muna, Representative Carlos Zarate. Good evening, Congressman Zarate.
Good evening, Robbie. Good evening, Ami. At magandang gabi sa ating mga nanonood ngayon at nakikinig.
Okay, well, Mr. Zarate, everybody knows the context of why we invited you here. At the same time, wala naman pong bago sa mga red tagging, pati mga binitawan ni President Duterte. Obviously, this also has something to do with elections, as you're saying. But I wanted to lead off with something that you said. Sabi nyo, bukod sa hindi to bago, bukod sa delikado pa rin to, squid tactics lang to. And by squid tactics, you mean, inililihis lang yung atensyon ng mga tao. Inililihis po sa ano?
Well, Robbie, Ami, ano ba ang mga matitinding issues ngayon? No? Wala pa ring tigil yung pagtaas ng presyo ng petrolyo na dumadagdag doon sa matinding krisis na hinaharap na natin at nilagdagan pa ng COVID. Tapos ito nga problema ng pagtaas ng petroleum products. Today, yung utang natin halos nasa 3 trilyon na. No? And ang ibig sabihin niyan, as announced earlier by the Department of Finance, we have to expect more taxes para mabayaran yung mga utang na yan. At iba pa mga samot-saring mga usapin. No? Andyan yung tuloy-tuloy na aggressiveness ng China sa West Philippine Sea. At hindi nga natin naringgan ng statement ang Pangulong Duterte rito, no? Na sa katunayan, his policy is the one that is enabling China to be more aggressive in the West Philippine Sea. So ito yung gusto talagang ilihis na mga usapin, no, ni Pangulong Duterte na dapat ay nasa table, no? Especially sa mga tumatakbo nung sa presidential election. Dapat pinag-uusapan ito dahil mga mahalagang issues ito that confronts our people. And of course, isang usapin din yung gusto niyang mag-sow ng intrigues, no? Dito sa lumalakas na suporta doon sa oposisyon, no? Na gustong mapigilan yung tambalang Marcos Duterte, no? At ang panunumbalik ng diktadura at pagtutuloy-tuloy ng tiraniya sa ating bansa. No? So yun yung ibig sabihin natin, no? Na for all intents and purposes, this is really a political calculated action from Malacanang. Despite the pretensions of President Duterte, tingin namin talaga ginagawa niya ito para matulungan, no, ang napipili na niyang kandidato at walang iba ay ang tambalang Marcos Duterte ito.
Pero Congressman, consistent yun sa target nila, no, na tapusin nga daw yung communist insurgency na inililink nila yung progressive groups. Ngayon may bago siyang acronym, it's catchy, may kabag daw kayo. Alam niyo naman, pangmasa yung ganyan eh. Naapektuhan ba kayo yung kampanya ninyo, yung grupo ninyo ng mga tumatakbo? Is it affecting you in an adverse way?
Well, I will be dishonest if I say na hindi kami naapektuhan, Ami, no? Dahil sa totoo lang, the government, no, ang administration is using all its resources against us, no? Since 2017, after the collapse of the talks between the GRP and the NDFP, ay nung itinatag na itong NTF-ELCAC, wala na itong ginawang ibang target, no? Kami na, no? Lalong-lalo na sa Makabayan Black sa Congress. Gusto na nilang paalisin kami dahil kami yung naghuhumiyaw dyan. Halimbawa, binubusisi namin yung budget, no? Against the corruption. At ito nga ang panahon ng pandemya, nung in-expose namin na mas malaki pa ang budget ng NTF-ELCAC kaysa COVID-19 interventions, talagang galit na galit yung Malacanang at ang security sector, no? Kaya buong makinarya ginamit against us, no? Nakita naman namin, no, sa pag-iikot ko ngayon from Luzon to Mindanao, talagang systematic yung campaign. Halos pare-pareho yung mga tarpaulin na nilalatag. Talagang merong nagtatrabaho nito at ang alam namin talaga ang NTF-ELCAC ang sa likod nito. And again, dahil sa red tagging na ito, sabi namin hindi lang ito simpleng labeling. Dangerous ito dahil halimbawa 2 weeks ago, yung aming coordinator sa General Santos City, si Larry Villegas, no? Habang naghahanda sa supposedly parating na rally noon ng Lenny Kiko tandem, he was shot, no, days before. Fortunately, he survived. But there are others sa aming mga kasamahan na are not so fortunate, no? At meron ding ibang sinampahan ng mga gawa-gawang kaso. So, apektado rin kami. But naipakita naman namin, no, sa loob ng 2 dekada na ng Bayan Muna at ng mga kasamahan namin sa Makabayan Bloc sa loob ng Kongreso, ang aming lakas talaga ay nasa mamamayan, nasa ground, no? Kahit ano pa ang ginawa, even in the previous administration, dahil naipakita namin yung aming sinserong paglilingkod, no? Sa loob ng 2 dekada na yan, yung mga batas na itinutulak namin, yung mga reforma at ang mga pagtindig namin para sa interes ng mamamayan, we are optimistic na we will still surpass this problem, no? And we will be re-elected in the coming May election, Ami.
And gaya nga po ng sabi nyo, you're optimistic of getting re-elected precisely because I would presume factored in na po itong pag-associate sa inyo sa mga komunista, sa Communist Party in particular. Gaya po ng sabi natin, hindi to bago. But apart from these attacks on you, ay may kasama pang red tagging na rin ngayon kay Vice President Leni Robredo, still ng NTF-ELCAC. Now, of course, now your groups have also now allied with Vice President Leni Robredo. She's getting that support. This attack from Malacanang and from government, do you suspect it's about you or is it really more about Vice President Leni Robredo?
You are correct there, Robbie. Actually, ginagamit lang kami talaga ng Malacanang, no? Dahil wala namang hinto yung atake nila. At yun yung bago ngayon, no? Ang target talaga nito ay ang political opposition, especially Vice President Leni, na lumalakas, nagpapakita ang mamamayan ngayon na malakas ang pagsuporta nila, no? Kahit na ni-red tag na yung mga rallies niya, beginning doon sa Cavite rally, hindi napigil yun. Lumabas pa rin ang mamamayan. At in their desperation, no? We can expect in the coming days na meron pa silang mga gagawing mga dirty tactics, no, just to prevent, no, people from coming out and show their support to the political opposition. But gusto ko lang i-register din Robbie, no, while it is true that nothing is new in this red tagging, ang nakakabahala lang dito dahil talagang itong guilt by association, binura na nila yung distinction between what is an illegal party and what is not an illegal party, like Bayan Muna and members of the Makabayan Bloc. Sino yung armed at sino yung unarmed, no? Kasi isa na lang nila, mga terorista daw kami. Then that is coming from the president, no? Parang isang hudyat na this is an open season for attacks against the political opposition, not only against the Makabayan Bloc, but even the political opposition na sinasabi nila ngayon is they're accusing of creating a coalition, no, na wala namang talagang basihan. So yun yung nakakabahala dyan in the coming May 9 election, no? Parang hinahanda na nila yung senaryo na ito yung mangyayari, no? At kung magkakaguluman or kung magkakadayaan, ay gusto nilang ma-justify na ito at this early, Robbie.
Well, beyond the elections, today merong report na yung ibang party list members, sabi nila they're open to amend the party list law. Kasi nga daw, well, mga kakampi sila ni President Duterte and they agree na, sabi nila, ina-abuse daw yung party list system. What do you think of those proposals? Sa tingin ba kailangan niyang amendahan yung party list?
Yes, I agree. Actually, since I think 15th or 16th Congress, ay naghain na tayo ng amendatory bill, no? Unfortunately, hinaharang ito ng mga, alam mo na, kung sino yung kumukontrol sa Kongreso, no? Dahil gusto natin sanang panatilihin yung spirit and intent why inintroduce ng ating Constitution ang party-list system, no? Copying it from the European tradition, no? But up to now, ang pinakamalayong naabot niyan is in the I think 16th Congress, dumating siya sa plenaryo pero just like that, no? Wala nang pag-usad ito. Kami ay naniniwala na dapat nga itong susugan na amendahan dahil sa ngayon talagang na-hijack na ito, no? Some may term it bastardized by allowing just anybody, no, to join. At ginagawa itong backdoor ng mga dynasties, ng mga big political and economic interest groups, no? Kaya naman nakikita mo na ngayon kung sino-sino na lang ang andyan sa party list, kung ano-anong mga pangalan na lang, no, na wala namang malinaw na advocacies, no. So kami rin ay bukas diyan, no, sa ganyang mungkahi na susugan ito rather than abolishing the party list system, no. Dahil token na nga lang ito, kung titingnan mo, 20% of the members of the House of the Representatives hina-hijack pa, tapos ngayon ang solusyon mo ay aalisin ito, no. So mas lalong nalalagay sa disadvantage yung ating mga tinatawag na nasalaylayan, Ami.
Pero Mr. Zarate, ika nga nila, the million-dollar question, paano niyo isusulong yung reforma kung ang mga magre-reforma is mismo yung mga taong, gaya nga po nung sabi niyo, ay may self-interest?
Yes, talagang ano yan, Robbie, painstaking, mahabang proseso, kaya kailangan gawin rin itong kampanya sa labas ng Kongreso, no? Makikialam dapat ang mga mamamayan dito, lalong-lalo na yung mga marginalized and underrepresented sectors, no? Kailangan tuloy-tuloy na pukawin sila, organisahin sila at immobilize, no, para sa usapin na ito na pag-strengthen ng ating party list system. And of course, we have to engage also yung mga institutions like the Commission on Election na napakaluwag nila, no, sa pag-accredit ng kung sino-sino na lang ng mga party list groups, no. Pero napaka-stricto naman doon sa ilang grupo na talagang tunay na nagtutulak na mga agenda ng mga batayang sektor, no? For example, lately merong organisasyon ng mga nurses na ito yung talagang tinamaan sa panahon ng pandemya, hindi nila inaccredit, no? For some technical reasons. Pero meron namang nag-apply na hindi mo nga maintindihan kung bakit panlaban ba ito sa mga kapre or kung ano, dahil sinasabi ay party list ito, no? So ayun, no? So kailangan i-engage rin yung mga institutions, and finally, I think the Supreme Court itself should also revisit its decision on the party list law dahil ito rin yung dahilan, no, kung bakit lumuwag na ngayon ang pagpasok ng iba't ibang grupo dito.
Well, sa election pa rin, you were talking about the opposition. Actually, ang description ng marami sa mga kandidato non-administration, di ba? And they're
Yes.
talking of the need to consolidate kung balak ninyong mahabol yung frontrunner, the current frontrunner. Meron bang mga usap-usapan na ganyan yan? Halimbawa, with the group of Calio de Guzman na mag-consolidate behind the common candidate. Buhay pa ba yung usapan na yun? Because the elections are just a few weeks away.
I'm not personally involved sa ganung mga usapin, Ami, but I know that there are still efforts, no? Para lahat ng non-administration candidates, especially ang lahat ng anti-Marcos at anti-Duterte candidates ay will have to come together. No? Dahil hindi naman lahat ng non-administration candidates ay talaga anti-Marcos. No? At sa tingin namin, ang overarching issue talaga rito ay panunumbalik ng mga Marcoses, no? At ang pagtuloy-tuloy ng mga Duterte type of governance with this tandem. No? So I think, personally, tingin ko kailangan pa rin i-pursue ang ganong agenda, no, na pagsasamahin yung lahat ng mga anti-Marcos, anti-Duterte forces para talagang mapaniguro, no, na mapigilan ang pagbabalik ng diktadura at ang pagtutuloy-tuloy ng tiraniya sa ating bansa.
Ang Makabayan Bloc po had eventually and finally said that you recognize that it's the Lenny Kiko tandem that is the real genuine opposition at this point na kinikilala, and that should get some help for the campaign. Pero ito po sa totoo lang may dilemma rin naman talaga because Makabayan, the progressive groups, Bayan Muna, you do have people on the ground at the grassroots level. Any campaign would want that, but acknowledging as well what Malacanang and the administration is trying to do, which is really tarnish any association with the left. How do you balance that? On the one hand, you want to help the campaign at the grassroots level. On the other hand, sa totoo lang, you must be conscious of how you are being portrayed at the grassroots level.
Well, you will be surprised, Robbie, no? Despite itong talagang intense red tagging at inaamin namin may mga epekto ito, pero doon sa mga napupuntahan namin na mga komunidad at napapapaliwanag namin kung bakit kailangang ang ating suportahan ay ang tandem na Lenny Kiko at ipinapakita namin kung ano ang ginagawa ng Bayan Muna at ang Makabayan Bloc sa loob ng Kongreso ay andyan pa rin yung simpatya ng mamamayan, no? Ang amin lang talagang nararamdaman ngayon ay yung mga dating, siyempre, yung mga nasa LGUs, yung mga opisyal na dati ay talagang openly ay nakakausap namin. Merong marami-rami na rin na hindi na bukas, no? Openly nakikipag-usap, but meron pa rin mga tulungan on the ground dahil yung aming mga constituents ay mga constituents din nila, no? And that is understandable dahil in this kind of election na kailangan mong mapalapit doon sa Malacanang at doon sa may mga pondo, then naiintindihan namin yon. But again, ang aming lakas ay nasa ground and ito ang aming minamaximize dahil wala naman kaming resources to engage in an air war, no? Doon sa mga political advertisements. So we are still optimistic, no, na itong mga balakid na ito ay aming pangingababawan at magtatagumpay pa rin, no, yung aming pagtutulak ng mga reforma sa loob ng at labas ng Kongreso.
Paano messaging nyo to counter what the administration is saying? Kasi ang pinakamalaking issue nila sa inyo they're linking your group kahit hindi naman mahirap i-diretsang link, no, na you are financing violent acts against the state. Paano sinasabi niyo sa grassroots? Kapag ganon, how do you...
Yes, Ami, medyo may na rin, no? May kahirapan. But pag ipinapaliwanag natin, halimbawa, sa loob ng 2 dekada, ang Bayan Muna ay nakapagtulak na ng halos ng himigit kumulang 19 na batas na may pakinabang ito sa ating mga kababayan, no? At ito yung pinapaliwanag natin ano ang papel ng party list groups, no, or party list like Bayan Muna. Hindi lang ito tinatawag nating fiscalizer sa loob ng Kongreso, kundi talagang dinadala nito yung boses ng mamamayan. And ano pa rin, no? Ang pagtanggap sa amin, mainit ang pagtanggap sa amin ng mga mamamayan sa mga napupuntahan naming mga komunidad at mga lugar, no, na kung saan ito ang aming mga base talaga. Of course, at this time, Ami, no, especially in the presidential election, ngayon ay merong mga 175 party list groups ata, no? At lahat ito ay marami rito ay mga party list groups na mga political clans din, na mga political families. So kami rin ay nag-engage na rin doon sa tinatawag nating bailiwicking, no? Kino-consolidate namin yung aming mga bases, no? Ang aming mga identified na mga lugar kung saan kami malalakas, no, dahil ito ang magpapanalo sa amin just like in the past, no. In 2019, for example, Ami, despite the attacks on us, no, since 2017, ang Bayan Muna ay naging number 2 party list group at nakapagpaupo ito ng 3 kinatawan in the 18th Congress, no. And nakakuha kami noon ng mga at least 1.2 million votes, no. So ito yung kino-consolidate namin. Inaabot namin itong malawak na bilang na ito para magdadala pa rin sa amin, no, sa darating na eleksyon ng Mayo.
Ay, Congressman, sa kampanya niyo at sa mga nakikita niyo, ano po bang matunog na mga issue na talagang kumakagat sa mga tao ngayon?
Robbie, ang ano pa rin ngayon, talaga yung tinatawag natin gut issues, no? Ang tinatanong nila, usapin ng ayuda, lalo pa nung mga komunidad hanggang ngayon hindi pa rin nakakatanggap ng ayuda, itong usapin ang pagtaas ng presyo ng petrolyo na talagang tinamaan lahat, hindi lang naman transport sector, no? At itong bago, yung tinamaan ng ating sektor na agrikultura, no? Talagang ang mga magsasaka natin, halimbawa doon sa norte, nitong pagpasok ng mga smuggled ng mga gulay na ito ay talagang tinatamaan sila, no? So at maraming mga issues na talagang apektado ang sigmura ng ating mga kababayan at 'yun ang aming pilit na tinutugunan at pinapaliwanag sila kung ano sa kanila kung ano ang ginagawa natin. So itong mga ganitong mga pagtugon sa mga issues na ito, naniniwala kami na kahit anong klaseng red tagging pa yan ang gawin nila, yung pilit nilang kinukulayan kami na kami ay mga teroristang, marirealize din ng ating mamamayan na ito ay walang katotohanan dahil yung sinasabi nilang tunay-tuniladang ebidensya daw, no? During the Senate hearing noon, sinabi na nila yan, truckloads of evidence. But until now, wala silang napatunayan. Kaya kami na ang nag-pushback ngayon. No? Sinampahan natin ng kaso itong mga opisyal na ito na ginagamit ang oras at resources ng pamahalaan para sa mga ganitong walang katuturan na mga gawain.
Okay, Congressman Carlos Zarate, Bayan Muna Representative, maraming salamat po.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Robby. Maraming salamat, Miss Ami. At magandang gabi sa ating lahat. Mabuhay po kayo.
Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Yes, of course.
Back to Chiefs here on One News. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama pa rin po natin si Ami Pamintuan. And now we're also joined by Ed Dingao of One News. And now joining us is European Ambassador to the Philippines, Luke Veron. Good evening and welcome to the Chiefs, Ambassador Veron.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Ambassador, of course, a lot of people, every time we mention Europe now, immediately think of Russia and Ukraine. Maybe give us an update. And for starters, we also want to ask, is there any way to predict how much longer or how much bigger this crisis will go?
We are about to enter the 5th week of this military aggression on the part of the Russian Federation on their neighboring Ukraine. I will not try to predict how long this crisis will last. However, we definitely support every effort to put an end to this senseless war of aggression, and anything that can be done to convince President Putin that there is nothing to gain here.
Well, Ambassador, of course, part of the convincing part is are the sanctions that are being imposed by European countries on Russia. But at the same time, there's also concern over the possible impact of these sanctions, not just on the global economy, but also on the energy sector, which of course concerns all of us. Could you tell us more about how these sanctions are working and how they're impacting, for example, the energy sector?
Well, we have adopted an unprecedented package of sanctions against individuals from the Russian Federation and Belarus being supporter of this war, a direct supporter of this war, and a number of entities. The purpose of those sanctions is obviously to change the calculation of President Putin in waging this war. Of course, it has an impact on a number of economic parameters at a time when the world is recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, sir.
So there is no good time to have a war, but definitely this time is not a good one.
Well, are there any plans to impose more sanctions? Because we understand there have been several initiatives to negotiate to put an end to the conflict, and so far they don't seem to be working. Are there any plans to further escalate? Because the sanctions have been unprecedented. Some of the European countries have done unprecedented moves since the war.
This is correct. Unprecedented sanctions, also in coordination with a number of partners around the world, in Europe and elsewhere, that really definitely are aiming at putting pressure on the decision makers on the part of the Russian Federation. Yes, we could always go further in terms of sanctions. As we commonly say, nothing is really off the table in that sense, in terms of economic sanctions. But we believe that these sanctions already have a certain impact.
Beyond this current crisis, and beyond even NATO, when you factor in how the international community, North America and Western Europe in particular, are wielding these economic sanctions, really at unprecedented and historic levels, how is this changing not just yet NATO, but Europe and the Western world in general?
Well, first of all, there is a sort of coalition of the international community that is expressed through two resolutions of the United Nations adopted by 140 countries. I'm very glad to say, actually, including the Philippines and other partners around the world. So this is not to diminish the impact, of course, that this crisis has on Europe. After all, the crisis is happening in Europe. But it's important to understand, and I think the international community come to realize that this is going far beyond a European issue, if you wish, and this is going to the heart of our international rule-based order. When a major country, a big country, is trying to bully, and more than bully, actually, serious humanitarian consequences. More than 4 million people now have left the country, half of them are children. And of course, we have welcomed them in European Union. We have 4 countries, 4 member states that have borders with Ukraine. And of course, a country like Poland, for example, and also Romania are making a big effort to welcome this flow of refugees, which represent 10% of the Ukrainian population. So yes, it's transforming, if you wish, the context in which the European Union and other European countries and other countries around the world are operating. But this is quite unprecedented as a crisis, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, actually. The whole point of this military aggression doesn't make a lot of sense. It's unjustified. It's unjustifiable even. So yes.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, of course, one imposes sanctions in order to effect a policy change. Would there be a working timetable by the European countries by which they will decide whether, or by which time they will assess or reassess whether the sanctions are working and therefore they need to be loosened up, or whether the sanctions need to be reinforced with more sanctions?
We don't have an official timetable on this, but it is very clear that every day that passes increases the abominable suffering of the population in Ukraine, and it's creating really unnecessary damage in the country. So the sooner the better, but we don't have an official timetable for this.
Ambassador, we have a limited time and I want to squeeze in another topic. There's a sub-variant of the Omicron variant that is spreading in several countries in Europe. Could you tell us more about what's happening now? Because we are worried that it might happen as well in the Philippines. Shanghai is locked down and we might have the same problem.
We are in a phase of dealing with the COVID that has moved already from the pandemic to the endemic situation. So we have to. Most of the European population is triple vaccinated, and we have to learn how to live with the COVID. So the consequences are much less unpredictable than they were before. But yes, there is a rise in the number of infections at the moment in Europe. It can, of course, be looked at with some concern, but at the same time, the progress that has been done not only in Europe but also in the Philippines in terms of vaccination is somewhat reassuring as to how we can deal and live with the virus.
If you could speak, if you could speak more about that, Mr. Ambassador, I mean, the implications and the promise, as well as the continuing challenges of the reopening of the global economy and the reopening of the Philippines as well. What's your prognosis for how the Philippines will fare, in particular in the context of our trade and relations with Western Europe?
I think this is an important question. In 2021, we now have the figures. For example, the level of trade between the Philippines and the European Union has recovered the pre-pandemic level. The Philippines has a surplus in trading goods with the European Union of about 55 or 60 billion pesos. But yes, we are quite optimistic. Of course, at the moment we have tensions around inflation. Some of that is due to the war in Ukraine. Other aspect of the inflation trends also because of the bottlenecks that have been created by the recovery in the production sector. But there are good reasons to be optimistic, both for the Philippines and for the world economy. But of course, the war in Ukraine may have a little impact.
Okay, European Union Ambassador Luc Veron, thank you very much, sir, for joining us tonight. We hope to see you in person very soon.
I hope so too. Thank you very much.
But thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Mr. Ambassador.
Good evening po. So yeah, from there, from the ambassador, we segue to, well, I'd say our health ambassador. Kasi parati nating guest na. Matagal nating guest na dito. And now joining us is infectious diseases expert Dr. Ronjin Solante of hi sir, there you are. Magandang gabi, sir. Welcome back.
To remind us that we still have to talk about COVID.
It's been a while, eh?
Bago natin makalimutan, may COVID pa nga pala.
Well, sir, it's good to have you again. But at the same time, I suppose you guys agree with me here. Na it's good then that we haven't had him in a while. Because every time we have him, it's because of something bad, not because of any fault of yours. But Doc, well, there's been some talk, of course, again of pandemic versus endemic. Na baka by this time, medyo we're getting to the endemic stage already. Is it too soon to talk about that already, or are we almost there?
Yes. First of all, thank you for this. It's too early.
Too early.
For me, it's too early to talk about endemic. Why? There are countries that has a better vaccination coverage than us, but are still having surge of cases. Just give you an example, like South Korea is 81% or 82% vaccination rate. But they're getting more cases, daily cases. And precisely, this is one of the unpredictability of the Omicron and the very highly transmissible BA2. No? there are reasons to believe that we can be endemic, but at this point in time, there is also a reason to believe that there will be a possible surge and spike of cases once there will be waning of immunity of the majority of the population, while there is an ongoing community transmission of the BA2.
Waning of the immunity. I suppose by that you're referring to yung booster shot after a few months hindi natatalab. Plus the fact na marami pang hindi nagpapa-booster.
Yes, correct, Ed. No? And if you look at the data in terms of waning, especially against the BA2, that's more or less 3 to 4 months. No, protection against getting the infection is really very low. But one thing good, protection against the severe infection is still retained 6 to 8 months. But what I'm afraid of is when we have the election in May and then we have super spreader events and some of this population that has been vaccinated early November, December, especially the vulnerable population, then most likely that factor of waning immunity can cause another possible increase in the transmission.
Pero hindi ba kayo aren't you heartened na for the past weeks, in fact about 2 months na since the start of the campaign, katakot-takot yung mga super spreader events, pero so far okay naman yung infection rates natin? Or hindi nare-report, hindi na lang na-detect? What do you think?
Well, maraming factor diyan. Unang-una, we still have a very good immunity at this point in time. Nakita natin noong January, ang dami nating na-infect, no? And there are those who are infected, plus the fact that marami-rami nakatanggap na ng primary vaccine series. So we have that what we call hybrid immunity. But the hybrid immunity works only insofar as that it is not also a longer protection. That's why the government is really focusing now on people receiving the booster dose, the first booster dose for the eligible population, because we want to prepare that once there is waning immunity and all of these super spreader event, pag nag-converge kasi ito, doon natin makikita, no? Doon natin, and I hope I'm wrong.
Dr. Salate, I will admit dati, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, dati every day tinitingnan ng mga tao, ilan bang new cases kahapon? No? And that's what we were monitoring. Nowadays po, kayo, what would you say? Ano ba dapat yung numerong binabantayan natin ngayon to really have a good understanding of where we are?
Okay. Ang binabantayan pa rin namin, no, especially sa mga healthcare workers and those in the referral centers ng COVID, are the admitted patients. Kasi ito naman talaga yung parang metrics na napaka-importante for us, because this will also be an indication na the variant might be causing a severe infection. No? But we know that with this BA2, it's less virulent, but it's highly transmissible. And that's why we expect na ang mga kaso ngayon, pwedeng 2 to 3 days na lang, wala nang mga sintomas, ayaw na magpa-test, hindi na rin nagpa-test. So most likely, that's the current trend now. Masasabi natin, correct itong mga survey, yung itong data natin, dahil unang-una, mababa na talaga ang nagpapa-test. Kasi if you have symptoms, kung mild lang, sino bang gustong magpa-test? No? So we're not getting really the true picture. But I would say, a lot of those only have mild symptoms.
Doc, sorry, balikan ko lang. May sinabi ko yung a lot of these cases, 2 to 3 days lang. Did I get you right? And what exactly does that mean? 2 to 3 days lang silang infected and then they get well?
Yes, kasi unang-una, especially if you receive the primary vaccine series, then most likely you may get the infection, but you have a shorter duration of the clinical manifestation. No? Or in young, healthy population, ganun naman, maganda ang immune system natin. So if you get the infection, especially with the BA2, your symptoms will also be not as long as what we imagined with Delta, with Alpha before.
Nabanggit nyo kanina yung hybrid immunity. No? We had a surge of Omicron in January. Tapos may mga primary doses. Kung sakasakali, kailan tatama yan? Kailan hihina yung immunity para maging vulnerable na naman tayo to another surge. Sa pool ba nun yung election?
Parang doon tayo start monitoring, no? Although we're monitoring now the cases, no? But when you have a super spreader event where the transmission is high, so doon tayo mag-umpisa. Kasi kung yun yung mga indicators na pag maraming mataas ang mobility, mataas ang mga gathering na mga event, then there will be higher risk of transmission. And if there is that higher number of cases, then that can be predictive of most of these have waning immunity, and that's why they are symptomatic.
Doc, maybe you can give us an update as well on the science and the research and the actual arsenal at the world's disposal. I'm not talking about supply. I'm just talking about what we have tested at alam natin works beyond vaccines. Kamusta po ba ang arsenal na naihanda ng ating mga dalubhasa at saka mga pharmaceutical companies?
Okay, thank you, Robin. No? So I think we're better off now compared 2 years or 1 year ago, no? Because we already have this antiviral agent, no? And this antiviral agent, I think during the time that when we have the surge in January, a lot of those were taking also this antiviral agents, no? First is molnupiravir. Second is Paxlovid, no? Another antiviral agent which is really very effective for mild to moderate COVID, 88 to 89%. So meaning if you are high risk and you have symptoms, and then you'll be getting this drug, your risk of not getting hospitalized and death is around 88 to 89%. Then we have new batches of the monoclonal antibodies. Okay, there's these new monoclonal antibodies that can be given to immunocompromised. No, walang panglaban talaga. Na maski na bakunahan, na when you are given this monoclonal antibody, your protection will be as high as 77% to 80% for 6 months. No? That's how long the window of protection. So I think with this available antivirals and monoclonal antibodies, these are complementary to the vaccines.
Doc, ngayon, ipasok ngayon natin yung supply. And for that matter, accessibility and affordability.
That's something that's the problem, no? Because these are drugs that are manufactured by multinationals. So meaning it's really expensive. So it's really something that an ordinary Filipino cannot just get these medications.
Is the move to open the patent here, is that going to benefit us? Are we seeing benefits in terms of, other brands and more affordable brands, and for that matter, generics?
Yes, you're correct, Robin. Like molnupiravir now, the supply is being manufactured in India, and there is a local company that is going to manufacture that also. So I think that will be very important in terms of availability and cost. No? Paxlovid, there are already talks that there are drug companies outside the Philippines that are also interested, and I think Pfizer is also interested in opening this up to lower the cost of this drug. So I think in that direction, for the monoclonal antibodies, it's still a long shot because these are really purely manufactured by multinationals.
Doctor, may report ang Philippine Statistics Authority last year daw, COVID was the third biggest cause of death in the Philippines. Tapos yung sinite nilang figure was almost double yung death na na-report ng Department of Health. Can you explain that? And is that possible? Kasi may mga kilala din ako na actually namatay sila after getting COVID, and then after being cleared of COVID, na heart attack, na pneumonia, and died of pneumonia.
So I think that's what we call the all-cause mortality. So meaning some of them are not directly because of COVID, but because of complications of COVID. And when you have this data later on, no, kasi ang nangyayari niyan, himay-himayin mo yan para lang ma-confirm kung if it's directly related with COVID, or it's part of a COVID complication, or is it a post-COVID complications, no? Like the long COVID, then makikita mo talaga mataas ang not only mortality but the morbidity, the complications of COVID-19. And somehow tama yung sinabi mo, cardiovascular, no? Yung pulmonary are the two most common complications. even if you recover, but you will still get to have that long COVID. You got to be admitted in the hospital because of cardiac problem, because of pulmonary problem. So it's indirectly related with COVID.
Is that a risk dito sa Omicron sub-variant? Na,
Yes,
na kahit mild yung COVID mo, bababa yung immunity mo, at mako-complicate yung halimbawa may pre-existing condition ka, even if vaccinated.
Yes, I would like to expand on that, because there are new studies now coming from other countries that even Omicron and even with mild symptoms, you still have that long COVID. And the most common is like memory loss, brain fog, and then there are also yung functional capacity can also be affected. But there's this good data also from UK that vaccine can prevent long COVID. So I think the other benefit of vaccination, if we are going to put vaccination as an important strategy, not only it will prevent COVID, but it will also prevent long COVID. And there are data that even if you had the long COVID and if you have vaccinated, that risks, that duration of long COVID symptoms will also be lesser compared to unvaccinated.
So tuloy ba yung booster natin by the end of April, second booster? Kasi sa
hope
na 50.
Yeah,
50 ang napag tayo, 60 lang. Paano tayo?
Well, ang data naman natin is that we will start with the most vulnerable population, the 60 years old and those who are immunocompromised. And I hope there will be, FDA will have the approval for that, because that also entails EUA amendment for a second booster for these vaccines.
Okay, Dr. Ron Jean Celante, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Good to see you,
Doc.
sir.
Good to see you again.
Yes.
And that's all for this edition of the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News.